This is Anarchicus lupus and his friends. You'll be seeing more of them later when we do Bourride and Aioli, today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Bourride is a Provençal French fish soup, and it's like gall. It's divided into three parts. Part one, of course, is the fish, and part two is the soup, and part three is the aioli sauce that goes with it and turns it all into a bourride. And I'm going to start in on part two, the soup, which consists of 3 or 4 tablespoons of good olive oil, and a sliced carrot, a sliced leek, and a large sliced onion. If you don't have a leek, use another onion. And you want about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of mixed vegetables, all sliced, and they go into the olive oil and they cook very slowly for about 8 or 10 minutes. And this is, you cook them slowly, as always, so that you'll get all the flavor out of the vegetables. And they should cook covered, and they're not supposed to brown. And this is a wonderful kind of a fish soup, is because you can use any kind of lean, fresh fish, or lean, fresh frozen fish. The important thing, naturally, if you're making a soup or if you're using any fish at all, is that it really be fresh, and that means you can always tell by smelling it. If it smells as though it came from right out of the sea, it's fine to use. And in the Mediterranean, where this soup originated, they use a kind of fish that they have right there. And we can use the kind of fish that we have right here, as long as they're firm-fleshed and lean and white. For instance, you can use halibut. This is a lovely little baby halibut. You can use cod, and here's a great big cod fresh out of the ocean. This also comes frozen too. And then here's another excellent fish called the cusk. We've used this before. We used it in quenelles, and we also used it in a fish dinner. It's a member of the cod family, and you notice how its fins are. They just go straight all the way around and around to the tail, and it has a wonderful firm flesh, and it's a delicious fish. And this is an unusual one called Anarchicus lupus. That's the Latin name, but they call it a catfish or a wolf fish or an ocean whitefish. And it has a mean mouth. Look at those big thick lips and enormous teeth in there. But it has a delicious white firm flesh, and it also has fins that go all the way around. You probably would never know what it was if you bought fish fillets, because they'd never tell you. They just would say this was white fish for soup. But in the Mediterranean, they use a fish called a baudois, which begins with a B. We also have that in the Atlantic. That's called a monkfish. Or you can use whiting or merlan, which they call in French. You can use scallops. As long as it's white and fresh, it's fine, and you'd like a mixture if you could possibly have it. And you'd usually, when you bought the fish, it would be cut into steaks. And you want steaks that are about 1 inch thick anyway. And here's some halibut steak. And with this, you could have your fish man do it, or you can do it yourself. Just get a big knife and cut around the bone. And the 2 ends, the 2 thin ends, you cut off and discard because they're slightly gelatinous. This is a French fish knife, which is great. And you just cut it into serving portions. They're about 1 inch by 3 inches. Or it just depends on how you feel about it, but they're supposed to be in rather large chunks, and you can leave the skin on or not, as you like. Now, if you have a cod or a husk fillet or a hake fillet, a big one like this, that's about 1.5 inches thick, cut it into about 2 by 3 inch chunks. And for 6 people, you'd like at least 3 pounds of assorted fish, and you want it assorted if you possibly can, just because it gives much more interest to the soup. And now, if you happen to be a fisherman and you have a great big ocean catfish like this and you have the right equipment, you can just cut it yourself. Just cut it into big steaks. As you can see the flesh there, it's firm and fine and wonderful. If you happen to run into conger eel, that would also be good. And you can, the Provençal method is usually just to cut it in big steaks and leave the bones right in, and you just cut off the fin parts. That doesn't seem to cut it off as well as it should, but that does a pretty good job. I'll add this to my fish plate over here. I might as well have a piece of cusk while I'm at it, too. I'll use the tail part. There's nothing like having a whole lot of fish at hand. Now I guess I'll have to use a different system to cut that part off there. Put that upside down. If you're going to do a fish like this, you have to have all the equipment. I'll add that to the soup too to give it more interest. And now, when you've got, this is your part 1, when you've got that done, you can do the fish all ahead and cover it and refrigerate it. And then we're going to continue on with part 2, which is the vegetables. And these have had to cook about 8 to 10 minutes until they're tender. And then you want to add some tomatoes to them. This is the kind of recipe in which there are a whole lot of various ideas on how it should be done. I do it the way I like it. Some people don't put tomatoes in at all. And the soup is going to be strained, so you don't have to peel the tomatoes or do anything, just cut them up. And the tomatoes ideally should cook another 5 minutes in with the vegetables, and then you add your liquid to it. And if you have fish stock, add that, because it gives your soup much more flavor. You want about 3 quarts. Or you can use water if you don't have any fish stock. And then you want herbs. And with this you want a bay leaf, and you want 2 cloves of garlic. And the garlic you don't need to peel at all, you just put them right in. And then some thyme, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of thyme. And then we get to the very Provençal herbs, and one is fennel or fenouil. And you can buy this either in seeds, like this, just little seeds, or sometimes you can buy it in flour. This I brought over from Marseille with me. And then you have orange peel. This is very typical. You have 2 pieces of dried orange peel about 2 inches long, or you can buy bottled orange peel. If you have the bottled, you put in about 1/4 teaspoon. Then I always like to put saffron in. And be sure when you buy saffron, which is expensive, you use the saffron flowers, because you can get fake saffron, and you want to be very careful about the saffron. If you put too much in, it'll have a slightly medicinal taste. And then we want some salt in. And the salt depends on your taste. And then I also like to add some wine. This is optional, you don't have to. Either 1 cup of dry white wine or about 3/4 cup of dry white vermouth. And then ideally, you would like, this should all simmer together for about 15 minutes until it has a perfect taste to it. And then be sure and taste it and make sure that you have enough salt in it. That needs a little bit more salt. Because the idea of this is that it is in absolutely perfect it just tastes absolutely perfectly when the fish goes in. As you can see, this is very much like a bouillabaisse base, but it's not quite as strong. And then, when this is up to a rolling boil, in goes your fish. I'm just going to dump it all in together. And that has scallops in as well as all this various kinds of fish. And I'm going to put the cover on again because it should have been at a boil when all of this went in. And then you want to have just enough liquid to cover, and just so it covers the fish by about ½ an inch. And then it only cooks for about 10 minutes. So that is your part 1 and 2 together. And this, you do this just at the last, just before you're going to serve it. And then you have part 3, which is the aioli sauce. And this is a garlic mayonnaise. And that doesn't mean that it's a mayonnaise with garlic in it, but it's a mayonnaise made in a special way. If you're in Provence, you have a great big marble mortar like this. And you have garlic, and you pound it and pound it and pound it. And then you beat in your olive oil. So it's a very special, thick, delicious mayonnaise. Though no household should be without a marble mortar. In case you don't have one, you can make it perfectly well in a big bowl and use any kind of a pounding instrument. If you don't have a wooden masher, you could use a heavy ladle and pound with that. But before you add the garlic, you have a piece of dry French bread, and you cut the crusts off, and then you grate it into your bowl. And this helps thicken the sauce. You want about, or I should say, 1/3 to a half of a cup of breadcrumbs, or about 2 handfuls if you could squash it all together. It'd be about, see, I can squash about 2 handfuls of that together. And then you add either some vinegar or fish stock just to moisten it, about a tablespoonful. And then start pounding that around because you want this to soften up. And then you put in your garlic. And how much garlic depends very much on you. Some people put in 1 or 2 cloves per person. I find that for 6 people, about 4 large cloves are enough. And this is where you get ahead of the usual Mediterranean housewife, because you can put it in with a garlic press, and that advances your pounding a little bit. There are 2 cloves. I think this, when you make it, you'll find, after you've made it, just how much garlic you like. But it has to be definitely a garlic sauce. There's 3 in. Now that was 3, and here goes 4. What a wonderful invention the garlic press is. And try not to get any skin as it goes in. Now, I'm going to take the cover off of this now because it's boiling, and the soup should be at a steady, slow boil, which you wouldn't think, but that's the way it's supposed to do, and that's why you have the firm-fleshed fish. And now we're going to pound this, and be sure, I've learned this from very sad experience, be sure that you put a cushion under your bowl unless it's a very tough one. And the point here is that you've got to pound the garlic so that it's absolutely in a very fine puree. And if you didn't have a garlic press, you'd have to probably pound it about 8 or 10 minutes. But with the garlic press, it cuts it down to some extent. And now, also to help it go, I'm going to put in 2 egg yolks. See, if you were using a regular mayonnaise, you'd making a regular mayonnaise, you'd have to use about 4 egg yolks. But with this, you just need 2. Most people just say 1, but I always want to make sure that it takes. I did a messy egg breaking there. This is my husband's way of doing it in his hands. And then mix that all around. Now you're getting somewhat like a mayonnaise. When your egg yolks go in, you want to mix and pound until they're thick. Because if you don't, you're going to have a sauce that doesn't take. And then it's going to have some salt in as soon as this is thick. And about half a teaspoon of salt. And the salt seems to also help the mass to thicken up so it'll be ready to take the oil. And now I'm going to turn that fish down just a little bit. And now the oil goes in, and this is again just like a mayonnaise. Just a few drops at first until the sauce really thickens. Keep your eye on your olive oil boil in your olive oil bottle. And you keep pounding, pounding, pounding. This is always to make the sauce smooth. And then a few more drops of oil. Then after it's really taken and thickened, you can add the oil a little more quickly. And you can also stop pounding and begin using a wire whip. But it's just like any mayonnaise, it's this first part that's so terribly important. You can see why actually a big heavy mortar would be better, because you wouldn't have to hold on to your bowl while you pound it. You can add about a cup of oil, and this should be a good fruity olive oil. Fruity, I mean strong and tasting of olive. Now I think I could begin beating with the wire whip now. But if I were doing it like a Marseille type, I would keep on pounding, and it would take a very long time. Now I'll beat it a little bit and begin adding the oil a little faster. Because remember when we made mayonnaise a little while ago, it was always this business of the very careful adding of the oil at first. But this sauce is supposed to be a very thick, heavy one. Practically standing up on its own. I'm sorry to say, I had some mayonnaise that was down some Aioli in Nice, down in the Mediterranean. And they hadn't made it properly. They hadn't pounded it the way they should have. And you could taste a lot of garlic pieces on your tongue, and it just didn't have the proper consistency. Now can you see now how that is? You see that's a very, very thick sauce. And this aioli is good not only in a fish soup, but it's simply marvelous. We made a minestrone the other night and put some aioli sauce in it. It was just marvelous. Now you can put in a little more vinegar or lemon juice to thin it out and also to give it a little more taste. You could add some red pepper or red pepper sauce to it too if you wanted to make it very much stronger, but I don't really think that it's necessary. Now that's just about right. You see how thick that is. Now my fish, I'm going to move over a little bit because I think it's getting almost done. And now we want half of the sauce is to go into a little bowl, and that will be for serving. And then the other half of it is to be added to the soup. And with it, we're going to go 4 egg yolks. You can add more egg yolks if you want, 1 egg yolk per person. But I think 4 is enough because I don't want to make it too rich. And that just gets beaten into your aioli. And then you are ready now to take the fish out. And the fish is out when, the fish is done just when it's just done. It shouldn't be flaky, it shouldn't dry out, it should hold its shape. In about 8 to 10 minutes you'll find it's just about right. And this goes out on a hot platter, and then the soup is going to be strained. There's some little scallops coming along. And some of the vegetables come out with the fish too, which is quite all right. You can see why you want big chunks. There's that piece of cusk. Now, if you don't like to serve the skin with the fish, you can take it off as you arrange it on the platter. But the Mediterranean method is to just leave the fish and the bones and everything together, and then it shows that it was really fresh fish. Now, you want to keep this fish warm because we're going to make the liaison on the liaison of the soup. And so you're going to have to cover it and keep it warm somehow. You can either set it over hot water, or I happen to have a hot plate in the dining room, so I'm going to put it in there. And it only is going to be for 3 or 4 minutes. And there it's got its cover on, and that'll stay warm very nicely. And now we have the delicate and important part of making the liaison of the soup with the aioli. So we're going to strain the soup into the soup tureen. I didn't get everything out of there because I was doing this a little fast. Well, that has an absolutely delicious flavor. Let me get that out of the way. And then you want to save a little bit of this lovely stock for later. You'll see why. So take a good ladle full of it out onto a little bowl. And then you gradually ladle this hot soup onto your aioli sauce. This is really very much like making a custard, as you remember when you're putting anything hot into egg yolks. You always have to add the hot very, very gradually so that you don't scramble the egg yolks. And by this time, your mouth is really watering because it just has a lovely smell. Sort of sun and fish and garlic and everything that's good. Now, after you've got about 2 or 3 ladles into your aioli, you then pour all the rest of the soup into your pan again. And now this is going to be thickened over heat. And this is a very delicate part of the arrangement, of the recipe, because the egg yolks in the aioli sauce are going to thicken very gradually until they sort of nap the spoon and make a very lightly thick soup. And we've done this a great many times making a custard sauce. And I'm not going to do the whole thing because it takes about 4 or 5 minutes. But stir it over moderate heat for 4 or 5 minutes, reaching all over the bottom of the pan until the soup gradually thickens and just coats the spoon. And I have some that's all ready. I want you to see how it is. But this is something, I can't make this whole recipe in quite half an hour. So I had to skip that part because we've done custard so much. But as it gradually thickens, a little steam comes up, and then it thickens enough just to coat the spoon. You see, it just coats on the top of it. And then as soon as it's done that, and you don't let it boil, immediately pour it into the tureen, and you're ready to serve. And in this case, you should serve immediately. So the soup goes on, and that little extra bowl of stock, and the aioli. And then you're ready to serve, and the fish is staying warm on the platter. Now this is a very rich main course dish, and you really don't need much of anything else with it except or maybe some fruit at the end. But I think you'll see when you serve it yourself that you've got a full meal. And there's my hot fish. Now I'm going to show you how you serve this marvelous dish. You start out with 2 pieces of bread, and then you take your bowl of stock and you put just about a spoonful of this stock just to moisten the bread. Then you give each person a nice serving of fish and try to give them 1 piece of each kind that you have. And here's some scallops, and there's another nice bit of fish and some of those cooked vegetables. And then on goes the soup, a big ladle full of it. And then some of the aioli soup, aioli sauce. And now this is a bourride, when you have all of these things combined together. Now I'm going to do you one more so you'll remember how it works. 2 pieces of French bread, they're about 3/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch thick. And then 1 spoonful of this lovely, fragrant cooking liquid, and the fish. The reason you have the bread is because it thickens the soup also. You could, if you'd like, serve also boiled potatoes with it, but I don't think you'll find that it's necessary. And then on this marvelous garlic-flavored soup. I think it's very important in this recipe that if you can, you make a fish stock to cook the fish in, because it makes a great deal of difference in the taste. Some recipes that I've read just throw in the vegetables and the fish and boil everything up and depend on the fish and the garlic mayonnaise to give it a flavor. But I found with the tomatoes and the saffron and the good fish stock, you have a marvelous dish. And I think it's such an imaginative way of serving fish. And then you eat with a big soup spoon and fork, and you just cut it up and swish it all up and dig in, and there you are. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.